Hi all, it's Shulamit Lazarus, and I've been wanting to do this for a very, very long time. Some of you may know me from my walkaway videos. I am a healer and a life coach and a former liberal Democrat. Still a flower child, haven't left that. You can't take the flower child out of the flower child just because the Democrat Party decided to become its inside out version of itself. So I'm a highly sensitive person. Now that sounds like a throwaway line. Oh, everybody's highly sensitive or whatever. No, highly sensitive people have different DNA. And why is that important? I've been wanting to do this for a very long time. I may scooch around and try and make this a little easier for you to see because I'm very low tech. And the other thing is that I went to a hideaway somewhere away from the maddening insanity of the darkness. And just want to get information out to you, especially to people who are HSP. I'm going to go through a list, a test. So what I want you to do is I want you to just ask yourself, have you noticed that you're deeply affected by the people around you and how they are responding to everything? That you go very, very dark when you go dark. That sometimes it even can feel suicidal. That people have told you that you're depressed and you should have medication for that depression. That you understand things in ways that other people can't seem to see. I can go on about different things, but I don't want this to be an overly long video because I know people have very low attention span, and I don't have a problem with that, except that I am not somebody who shares things without going more deeply into them. So I want to talk about HSP because my clients, by and large, are incredibly sensitive. There are people that come that feel stuck, and I'm able to help them clear whatever issue is that has them stuck. I feel very blessed to have the gifts and the skills to do that. I have decades of background, and also it came to me through wafting through the ethers, that I'm a frequency whisperer. And by that I mean, am I the frequency whisperer or a frequency whisperer? I can't believe I'm the only frequency whisperer. So I'm just gonna say I am a frequency whisperer. And what that means is that I can feel thought. I can feel the charge of somebody's thought. I'm not an empath. Thank you, God. I don't want to be an empath, actually, because they tend to be very miserable people because they're picking up everybody's shit and they don't know what to do with it. It's emotional, right? They pick up the emotional stuff that people are putting out. I actually don't do that, although I'm highly empathic, and that's something that is innate to HSPs, and I'll go into that. But what I am is clairsentient, and what I am is clairsentient in a way that I haven't ever heard anybody be clairsentient. So I will right now say the frequency whisperer, because what I do is I feel frequencies as people speak. I feel their thoughts, so that allows me to know where they're stuck. I feel energy fields, which push my hand out when I think about them. But I also attune to the frequency vibration that someone is vibrating at when they focus on an issue that's bothering them. And then I can emit a frequency with my mind that then shifts the issue without us even talking about it. And for those of you who know about EFT, I would not throw out EFT. I'm an EFT master, but there is a function for EFT, especially with acute trauma. So I would never, ever let go of that. It has its function. The Lazarus process, which is the work that has been channeled through me that is allowing me or supporting me in creating, emitting a frequency that actually can lower physical pain and lower emotional pain, and clear exhaustion and clear trauma without the person talking about it, has had stunning results. However, having said that, I would not do work like that with somebody who is in a emotionally flooded space, because they need to focus on it. You need to focus on it in order to have that frequency, and then I will emit the frequency that shifts that for you. So that's the Lazarus process. So, and you can learn more about my work as a homeopath, and I have a background in nursing and psychotherapy, so I'm quite grounded. I don't want you to think that I'm cuckoo lala. I'm not. I'm extremely grounded. But today, what came to me, and if I don't do videos, when I think about doing them, when I'm spirited, when spirit moves me to do them, I will not do them. And so I grabbed this opportunity to do this one, because I'm hearing that that people are going more into suicidal thinking and dark. The suicide rate has gone up exponentially in the pandemic, and also the darkness that people fall into. And I'm mostly concerned at this point in sharing from my expertise and from my knowledge about what I know and who I am. And I want to speak to those who are also like me, but also those who are living with or loving people like me. I think that's extremely important. And I'm actually going to, I can't believe this, but I'm actually going to take you to get a tissue. All right, so let's talk about HSP, the highly sensitive person. What is that? So, the highly sensitive person, so sorry, but I am just going to be exceedingly real with you guys, because otherwise I'm full of shit. So, life is too damn short not to be real. Okay, so, sorry. What is HSP? The highly sensitive person. The highly sensitive person is a designation that was given by Dr. Elaine Aron, who is a research and clinical psychologist. And she, I don't have to go into the whole thing about it, but anyway, but she was the one that started to express that idea about the highly sensitive person, did research, and found out that it's actually genetic. So this is something you may recognize in your own families. Okay, so the highly sensitive person is made differently. Our DNA is different. And the way I found out about me was actually not from sensitivity, but I did a saliva test, and the practitioner said, oh, you have very high dopamine levels. And so what are you taking? And I said, I'm not taking anything. Oh, well, whatever, is it nuts or this or that or whatever? And when the universe gives me something twice, I pay attention. If it gives it to me once, I have to say that it may very well go over my head, because I have so many other things on my plate. But when it gives it to me twice, then I go, okay, Spirit's talking to me. So, I'm an auditory intuitive, so things come to me auditorily, as in, oh, you're the frequency whisperer. Okay. What I got was highly sensitive person that came back. I had heard about it years ago. I thought, oh, well, everybody's sensitive. It's no big deal, right? I didn't realize how important that frame was. Okay, so I said, you know what? Let me look it up. So when I started looking it up, I started realizing that there's a possibility that the reason why I react the way I do and the dopamine are somehow connected. So one thing led to another, and this was years ago, and I started researching, and it changed my life. and it reframed and healed my life retroactively. So things I used to hear when I was 15 years old, you think too much. It always felt to me, and I was in Israel at the time, so there's also a cultural thing there, but it always felt to me like an assault. You're too sensitive. You think too much. You're hysterical. Like all these things that were said that became like these jabs that hurt my self-esteem, that formed my image when I was younger, that made me feel different and somehow made me feel like there was something wrong with me. The most important thing is that it made me feel like there was something wrong with me, as opposed to making me feel different. Because those of you who are HSP, you are resplendently, magnificently different for a reason. And that is that because you are a strategy of survival for this planet. So let me explain that. 15 to 20% of humanity, and by the way, it goes through the animal species. So there's the highly sensitive dog, there's a highly sensitive cat, there's a highly sensitive housefly, believe it or not, there's a highly sensitive monkey, okay? 15 to 20% of the human species is highly sensitive. What does that mean? Our DNA is different. Our the area for compassion in our brain is different. And we tend to have higher dopamine. So what is dopamine about? Why is dopamine important? Dopamine is responsible for optimism. It's responsible for goal striving. It's responsible for accomplishing, and it's responsible for orgasm. So my thought was, certainly don't fuck with my dopamine, right? Right? Dopamine's important. Dopamine is extremely important because it's what lets us get up again, right? We are incredibly resilient, but not if we define ourselves as defective. So 15 to 20% of the population, the human species, is HSP. 80 to 85% is non-HSP. Why is that important? Because the medical system was created by the non-HSP for the non-HSP. And the education system was created by the non-HSP for the non-HSP. So we drop through the cracks, not as much if we're girls, because girls are allowed to be softer and more emotional, but if we're boys, right? And so then you have boys thinking there's something wrong with them because they're in this macho mentality. Although, given everything that's going on with BLM and the transgenderism and all the other stuff, they're supporting that feminine thing and supporting even getting hormones for it. But that's that's a whole nother conversation. That's a conversation about Agenda 21 and the Great Reset. I'm not going to have that now. So anyway, and the medical system was made by the non-HSPs for the non-HSPs. Why? Because again, the non-HSPs are 85% of the human population. So there's two strategies on the planet. One is the non-HSP and one is the HSP. And the HSP is, let's go to the non-HSP first. The non-HSP is the strategy of soldiers. They are the ones that take a little bit of information, they shoot from the hip, and they go out and they fight, right? Saber-toothed tigers, whatever it is. But the thing is that they die, okay? They get killed. They're soldiers. They die, right? But if you only had a planet made of non-HSPs and people were running out without a lot of information, they're getting killed, you're not going to last very long. So evolution, or God, however you want to put it, or the universe, set up a strategy brilliantly called the HSP, the highly sensitive person, the highly sensitive gene. And we are the ones that say, wait a minute, let's just pull back and let's just look at everything and think about everything and look at the whole picture, and then determine what's the best plan of action. So we are the healers, and we are the counselors. We are the ones that whisper in the king's ear, like, sovereign, da 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 da, right? Let's think about this. Maybe don't go to war yet, you know? And it's an incredibly important strategy, right? Because when you have people going out without a lot of information, ready to fight, right? And they tend to be strong. Energetically, they tend to be very vital and their bodies are very strong, right? And they heal very quickly and so on, which you need, right? For soldiers. Okay. You need somebody that says, whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute. But those of us that are the ones that are saying, wait a minute, there's a downside also, right? Because let's say there's a bunch of grass and the human species is only going to survive if we eat the grass. The non-HSPs will run in there and start eating the grass without knowing, has that grass, how long has that grass been there? Is that grass contaminated? You know, all that stuff, right? Is it growing mold, whatever? And go in there and possibly die. The HSPs will then come back and say, oh, no, wait. Right? Let's smell it. Let's see it. Let's research it. I don't know. And if they wait too long, the grass will be completely gone. And then now they're dead. Right? So it's important to understand that we both have our function. The HSP and the non-HSP have our function. Now, because there are 85% non-HSP and the ones that are manipulating the data and stealing the election and doing all the black operatives, the black operatives and the black operations that are happening in our country today, most probably are not HSP, right? Anyway, but the most important thing in terms of the conversation for now is that you are most likely, if you're involved with somebody, probably involved with somebody who's not HSP, because there's more people that are non-HSP than are HSP, and that creates its own issues, right? But we won't go into that. That has to do with relationship and intimacy and love. What I want to go into is I want to actually have you do the test. And then I want to talk about some things that are very important. Okay, so before we even do this test, no, I'm going to do the test. Okay, all right, so we're going to do the test. So I would say that you should get out a paper and pencil and just write this down. Okay, and it's a yes/no situation. It's not like trending. It's not like what happens sometimes. It's like, is it yes basically or no, right? I am easily overwhelmed by strong sensory input. I seem to be aware of subtleties in my environment. Other people's moods affect me. I tend to be very sensitive to pain. I find myself needing to withdraw during busy days into bed or into a darkened room or any place where I can have some privacy and relief from stimulation. I am particularly sensitive to the effects of caffeine. I am easily overwhelmed by things like bright lights, strong smells, coarse fabrics, or sirens close by. I have a rich, complex inner life. I am made uncomfortable by loud noises. I am deeply moved by the arts or music. My nervous system sometimes feels so frazzled that I just have to go off by myself. I am conscientious. I startle easily. I get rattled when I have a lot to do in a short amount of time. When people are uncomfortable in a physical environment, I tend to know what needs to be done to make it more comfortable, like changing the lighting or the seating. I am annoyed when people try to get me to do too many things at once. I try hard to avoid making mistakes or forgetting things. I make a point to avoid violent movies and TV shows. I become unpleasantly aroused when a lot is going on around me. Being very hungry creates a strong reaction in me, disrupting my concentration or mood. Changes in my life shake me up. I notice and enjoy delicate or fine scents, tastes, sounds, works of art. I find it unpleasant to have a lot going on at once. I make it a high priority to arrange my life to avoid upsetting or overwhelming situations. I am bothered by intense stimuli, like loud noises or chaotic scenes. When I must compete or be observed while performing a task, I become so nervous or shaky that I do much worse than I would otherwise. When I was a child, my parents or teachers seemed to see me as sensitive or shy. So count up the yeses. If you have 14 or more, you most likely are HSP. Men tend to, because of this macho cultural paradigm that they've been brought up in, up until recently, is they're more likely to have lower scores. So if you're a guy and you just did this test with me, you're more likely to have a lower score, right? So your 16 is equal to a woman's possible 18. There were 27 questions. The higher the number you are in the yeses, the more highly sensitive you are. But if you're over 14, most likely you are HSP. I am 27 out of 27. I have only met one other person who was 27 out of 27. However, I'm sure there are many. She was a client of mine and an empath, and absolutely miserable being an empath. And one of the things that she said to me, which made me feel like I needed to do this video now, I was able to help her because she, a lot of times the gifts that we have are also a result of traumas. That's a whole nother conversation. But just suffice it to say that she had what she considered traumas when she was younger. And again, it doesn't have to be what somebody else considers a trauma. What is a trauma to an HSP is not going to be a trauma necessarily to a non-HSP child. So her strategy was to leave her body. Her strategy was to leave her body. So she was this way. She was partially outside of her body. And when I do energy work on people, as well as, do phone sessions. I mean, it's a lot I do. But anyway, one of the things that I felt we needed to do for her was to do an energy session, a hands-on energy session. I could feel her leaving her body at the same time that I was bringing her in, and she didn't like it. And she was angry, which I thought was interesting. She was angry at me because I was grounding her. And what came out is that it was a strategy. And she had a choice. All of you have a choice, right? With your gifts. And for her, it created a lot of problems, because when her husband was going through something and she was near him, she felt like she was going to vomit. And she was taking on everybody else's stuff. So emotionally, she was miserable. Anyway, so one day we were in a phone session, and she was talking about, she was very, very, very dark. I had done couples work with them subsequent to that, and their relationship is thriving now. But at that time, it was almost divorce time. And so she was very, very dark. She was carrying all this stuff. And she said, sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I just don't even care if I wake up. And then she quickly said, but I'm not suicidal. And I had done a test of HSP with her, which I do with a lot of my clients, to help them because they have defined themselves as something being wrong with them in an environment that is supportive of and celebrating non-sensitivity. So it's extremely important that when I work with people, I want them to know the magnificence of who they really are, to appreciate their being and the uniqueness of their being. And if they're HSP, I want them to understand HSP deeply, because it actually reframes their life. It's deeply, deeply healing. So I said, don't worry. I know you're not suicidal. I'm HSP. I totally get it. You're HSP. You're 27 out of 27. When we go dark, we go very, very dark. But we are the brightest lights when we go bright. And we can do it fast. We can go into sunshine being from darkness really, really fast. And one of the things that our sensitivity gets confused as is depression, right? So when we go dark, people think we're depressed. No, we're not depressed. We're just HSP, right? Or when we get distracted, it's like, oh no, you have ADD. No. We get distracted. Remember what I was reading. We have a hard time when there's a lot of stimulus. And that's because our nervous systems are made differently. Our nervous systems are made like computers that are running all the time. Imagine a computer that you have a sleep cycle for, right? So if it's overstimulated, it shuts down. If it's overstimulated, it shuts down. We don't function that way. We are constantly processing. The upside of that is that we get to understand things, and we get realizations, and we have spiritual epiphanies, and we have the most beautiful, beautiful connection to spirit and to transpersonal experiences, because we are constantly processing. We are processing everything. The downside is that we are processing nonstop. So we can get overstimulated. We can get very, very dark. We can think we're in a depression when in fact it's not a depression. It's just that we are feeling so deeply a darkness that's around us or inside us, and it gets magnified. So it's extremely important that you can tell the difference, because what will happen in the medical system, especially with big pharma, wanting to medicate everybody for every fart and burp because it gives them a hell of a lot of profit, is that they want to diagnose those of us who feel very deeply our own sadness, our own grief, the grief in the environment, the sadness of what's going on in the situation in our country and on the planet, as depression. But it's not. And so then what ends up happening is that you get medicated with something that dulls you, and it doesn't let you experience the totality of your being. So it's extremely important that you know what is depression and what is just an experience that you're having because you're HSP and because you're feeling very deeply what's going on. You guys saw me possibly in my walkaway video, and I started crying. That's something that is innate and a hallmark of people that are HSP, is we cry easily because we get emotional. We get emotional easily. And the reason why we get emotional easily is because we're constantly processing information. And people confuse emotion with feelings. It's not the same. Feeling is a state, happy, sad, glad, mad, all that stuff. That's a state, it's a constant state. But emotion, E means outward, and motion comes from the Latin motere, which means to move. It's our energy field actually with its own intelligence finding its own balance. And so what other people call being overly sensitive or hysterical is actually the intelligence of how we're made, which I consider God, and the magnificence of how it works. It's when that movement, that emotere, gets stuck, that it causes illness, that it causes dis-ease on the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual level. So it's extremely important to know that this is an environment politically that is very emotionally stimulating to everybody, but HSPs even more so. And so if you're feeling really dark, what I'm going to suggest to you is, because music most likely affects you really deeply, be very careful of the music you put on. Don't put music on to match the darkness. Don't do that. Find music that's the opposite. So if you're feeling really, really sad, put on dancing music. And the reason for that is because what we want to do is we want to move the energy field enough. And by dancing, we're getting the energy that's stuck out. I don't want to call it, I'm going to say energy stuck right now. It's really just conversation. It's actually data. It's actually data. It's data that's in storage, and we need to bring it to the motherboard, and then the motherboard processes it. Our motherboard is actually the consciousness that we actually are. We are all self-evolving, self-organizing computers that are constantly processing. We are then able to process that data and find our center again. It's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, so dancing is huge. Get physical. Get physical. Take walks. Take walks because it changes your perspective. That's really important. Take walks, move your body. Don't stay in one place. Get out. Get out. And if you can, get into nature, because that's extremely healing. Breathe fresh air. And if possible, get away from people in masks because it just keeps reinforcing everything. Sing. If you love to sing, sing, right? What you're going to do is you're going to be pulling your energy in the opposite direction. And of course, if you have any issues, I'm more than happy to help you. You can call me, you can reach out to me and ask me questions. I'm still on Messenger. You can also reach me through my office line, which you can find at www.shulameetlazarus.com. And I'll also put it in the description if you want to subscribe and hear more of the things that I have to say. When thoughts come up that I think would be valuable for you, then hit subscribe. I don't know what's happening with YouTube, but for now, nobody is censoring me. And the other thing that's really important is also to learn how to meditate, but not meditate. People get confused about meditation, and it's actually contemplation or it's concentration. Meditation is being in the observer. It's more akin to what you would be doing with Buddhist insight meditation. And I will teach that another time because it's extremely, extremely important. To be able to be in the observer as opposed to meditating on, focusing on the breath or focusing on the heart or focusing on love. That's not actually meditating. Meditating is being in the moment, at the moment. It's all about now. And in the now is perfection. There is no hunger in the now. There is no thirst in the now. There is no time in the now. There only is. And in that place, we are the witness. And when we are the witness, when we are the observer, we create a space between us and the story that we have about reality. Because we cannot have an emotion without a body, and we can't have an emotion also without a story. So if I have somebody who says ball, it means nothing to me, but to a 10-year-old that had a concussion and got hit by a ball in a baseball game, and then it affected their self-esteem because they stopped going because they were afraid that they were going to get hit again, and then their marks start going down. I'm describing somebody that actually came to me as a child for sessions. That has a lot of charge, right? It's a story, right? So story is very important, and that is what we call perception. And so what we want to do is we want to create a space between ourselves and the story. So those are some thoughts that I had that I just wanted to share with you really quickly. Of course, it's at 38.08, so that wasn't very quick. But then again, if you guys are with me, you know I'm not quick. All right, so that's it. And I will, if Spirit leads me to share another thing, I will share something else with you. I hope you got some value. You can look further into HSP and the DNA connection. And also you might realize that your children, maybe, or one or two, maybe HSP, or you're living with somebody with HSP, you might start understanding them a little bit better. I'll go more deeply into HSP another time. I send you all love. I send you all socially, completely undistanced hugs to everyone, and enjoy the day. And I will speak to you soon. Bye-bye.